want to all be face to face. I'm like, I do all
I'm
face to face,
assisting
but I
for
always
about
do
12 people, and
in
10 of them are also
I mean,
female.
it's a tool.
And you guys don't have to do this, but they call themselves Charlie's Angels.
There's no way I would call myself Charlie's
Yeah, I think you
Angels.
should do that.
No
Come on,
way.
Jen.
He's hinting, you know that, right?
Here's the great.
I think you need some more
Yeah,
angels
that
going
is funny.
forward.
Yeah.
Are you going to introduce
I
the mic?
need
No,
release
no,
for
no,
that.
You should, that would be
no.
great.
This is
know that.
broadcast
That was
live, so
something I
no,
learned.
we're not going to do that.
And you don't have to like
That's never
download
stopped
the
me.
document, then upload it back anymore. You can just grade right in Blackboard.
And I like it because you can pop up save a sign in that next window and just highlight. I give it
CFAC Record John Tyler. This session will be live streamed, so we'd like for you to keep your side comments to a minimum. We'll make sure your cell phones are off. I know we're all faculty here, and we can't use our teaching voice. We need to use the microphone for those who are viewing off-site. Raise your hand. We'll get into that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Hi, my name's Charlie Errico. I'm from Northern Virginia Community College, and I'm chairing this year the Chancellor's Faculty Advisory Committee, which they call CFAC, and we're going to use our 45 minutes as wisely as possible. I'm going to just spend about 10 or 15 minutes telling you a little bit about what CFAC is and some of the things that we've done the last couple of years, and then our last 40 minutes or so, what I would like to do is throw it open to questions, and we have actually about 10 CFAC representatives in the room. We have 6 on our official panel here, and let's have everybody introduce themselves and where they're from. Ellen, you want to start?
Ellen Hodges, Tidewater.
Jen Schaefer, Lord Fairfax, and I'm the CFAC Secretary.
Teresa Thomas, Blue Ridge Community College.
Tony Pepin, Virginia Western Community College, and I'm scheduler.
I'm Bethany Arnold. I'm from Mountain Empire.
And I'm Sharon Freeman, Southside Virginia Community College.
Okay. There are a couple of males on CFAC. It's not, but
They're in the audience.
they're in the back of the room there.
hiding.
Brian is in the back of the room.
Hiding.
So let me just tell you a couple of things about. I think what I'm going to do is just go through this very quickly. I think by being on the Chancellor's Faculty Advisory Committee, you really get a feel for what the 23 colleges are all about. I think most of us have a very tunnel vision. We're at one college and we know about that college, and we don't have an appreciation of what the VCCS is all about. And in a way, as a historian, I refer to our colleges like Jeffersons Dream, because when he wrote in his diary, he wanted a college, a school, some form of education within a half an hour's horseback ride of everybody in Virginia. And I think with 23 community colleges, we have a community college or a campus of a community college within about 30 minutes, 45 minutes of everybody in Virginia. And boy, are they different. Large colleges, Northern Virginia Community College has about 40% of the enrollment. We have 712 full-time teaching faculty. That compares to Eastern Shore, I don't think Paul is with us, that has 16, and then everything in the middle. Tidewater, Reynolds also very large, and a number of small colleges. Everybody is represented. And one of the things that we've been talking about actually for the last 3 years has been something called shared services, and you might have a question about that a little bit later. The Chancellor is firmly committed to a 23 community college system, and so that's in concrete. However, some of the community colleges have been losing enrollment in a very dramatic fashion. Eastern Shore right now, as I said, is down to 16 full-time faculty and 75 adjuncts. And its total enrollment is less than 1 division at Northern Virginia community colleges. So how do we maintain 23 community colleges? Well, we do it through shared services. We have 23 colleges, but we probably don't need 23 business managers. We don't need 23 HR departments. And so one of the things that you will see happening in the next couple of years, it's already begun, is shared services, where some of the smaller colleges will be consolidating those support functions with a center that's being developed, I believe, in Roanoke. Is that right?
Southside.
Near Roanoke, yes. And another thing that's very important to us is that we're serving a minority population. I know Nova better than I do the other 22 community colleges, but at Northern Virginia Community College, there are students from 165 different countries. And we are a majority-minority institution. And for many of these students, the community college is the 21st century Ellis Island. It's the only way that they can use to get an education. Many of them, like the students at your college, are the first in their family to get a college education, and they're fighting a lot of obstacles, including English is not their initial language. This is CFAC. I'm going through this very quickly, but if you have any questions, one of the reasons why we put this as the last session of the day is that when they stop streaming it, we'll stay around and answer any questions that you have, even after the 45-minute session is over. The Chancellor's Faculty Advisory Committee consists of 23 representatives, one from each one of the community colleges. Everybody has one vote, regardless of the size of the community college. How you get on it depends on the individual college. They all have their way of selecting CFAC representatives. Some are selected through a college senate, some are selected by another process. What we've tried to establish is a very active, collegial, cooperative dialogue with the Chancellor and his staff. I think many years ago there was kind of this perception of them versus us, and that just doesn't work. It doesn't work at CFAC, doesn't work anywhere really. And so I think we have a really good time in the sense that we meet once a semester for half of Thursdays and half of Fridays. The Chancellor and his staff tell us a little bit about what they're doing, and then we tell them about the concerns that we have as teaching faculty. So every one of you in this room should know who your CFAC representative is. And all of us are just representatives of you guys. And so if you have a system-wide concern that you want expressed at the VCCS level, you go to your CFAC reps. And then after our meetings, we go back to you and report back. We only deal with system-wide issues. If you're unhappy with your dean or unhappy with your president, you handle that locally. We deal with system-wide issues. What does that mean? Salaries. Good news is we're getting a 3% raise next year. Bad news is they're not going to give us a raise until about the middle of November, but it's still 3%. And we want to make sure salary and benefits keep up as much as possible with the national averages. Another thing that we've been talking about are alternative educational resources, how to bring down the cost of textbooks. At our last meeting, we talked a lot about security and safety on each one of our campuses. There have been at least 2 active shooter episodes in the last 8 years. This is something that we're all concerned with. We talk about enrollment and retention. It's been a flip-flop. Most of your presidents have talked to you about this. About 10 years ago, 70% of the VCCS budget came from the state. Now, 70% of the VCCS budget comes from tuition. You know, the state of Virginia is a deadbeat dad. You know, the check is not in the mail. And so, as a result, we have to keep enrollment and retention up to make sure that our budgets maintain a level that we can do what we want to do. And we talked a lot about this. There's a big difference between enrollment and retention. We don't have such a problem with enrollment. People are coming through the doors. The big problem is retention. We're losing a huge number of students from the fall to the spring. And from the fall to the following fall, about half of them don't return. And what do we do about that? We talked about at our last meeting some programs like Year Up and Man Up that focus on minorities, the particular problems they have, giving them mentorship, special advising, doing some things that might help. These are, just put this slide together last night. These are the things that we talked about at our last meeting, which was just last Thursday and Friday. Dual enrollment. Good news and bad news. Good news is many colleges are using dual enrollment as a way to get their enrollment up, and that's the good news. The not so good news is that there is an inconsistency with the quality of dual enrollment classes and classes on the campus. Brian in the back brought this to us just last week, and he compared grades, I believe, in history. Is that right, Brian? On dual enrollment and history on his campus. And the dual enrollment, A's and B's, campus, not quite that high. There needs to be a better dialogue between full-time faculty teaching traditional and hybrid courses on campus, and frequently the high school teachers who are teaching it at their local high schools. And we're not doing those kids at the high schools any favor if we're giving them a watered-down program that has nothing to do with a college class that we're offering at Nova or any of the other colleges. We also want to make sure that the students in dual enrollment are going to then come to our 23 colleges. We have to make sure it's an onboarding experience, that this is going to be a good experience for them, and then they're going to come to the community college and get a 2-year degree. Minority retention, we talked about programs. Workforce is a big issue. It's a big issue with the Chancellor. There's a new workforce initiative. The Chancellor, with us, we're pretty blunt. We're respectful and cooperative, but not deferential when we meet with him. And I think he likes it. I think he enjoys the energy in the room. Now, I've never been on ACOP, but I know that when you're, and we have people that can speak to this, but I would imagine that when the Chancellor is talking to his fellow presidents, that maybe they are giving him a little bit of information that they would expect him to agree with. We don't do that. We're pretty frank. And I think he enjoys that energy, the dialogue. I know he looks forward to the meetings. Frank, but respectful. And he said that some schools are doing a really good job at workforce. Lord Fairfax is doing a great job. He said some schools are doing an awful job. And he looked at me because Northern Virginia Community College was right at the top of his list. Security and safety, we had a nice presentation from Mary Savage. If you haven't heard her, you need to hear her. She's the VCCS person in charge of security and safety. There is about a 10-minute video that any of your CFAC reps can give you that came from Tony's Virginia Western College that deals with what you do with an active shooter on campus. It's great. It's something you should see as faculty members, your students should see. It won't take any time. It was produced right in-house by one of our community colleges, Virginia Western. We talked a little bit about Title IX. We're just kind of scratching the surface on this one. Title IX is a great piece of legislation. It goes all the way back to the civil rights movement of the 60s and 70s. And it's designed to protect our students from sexual harassment. And yet, at a couple of the colleges, there has been some concern about due process and academic freedom. When you're talking about a topic, sometimes that topic lends itself to issues that can be a little unsettling to some of our students. So where do we cross the line? I mean, what can we say in a classroom that deals with, let's say, a psychology class on marriage and the family, or a history class that talks about Gilgamesh, which deals with prostitution? How do we maintain our academic standards and at the same time protect ourselves against Title IX types of legislation? And that's on our radar. It's only been a concern at 3 of the 23 community colleges, but we think we want to deal with that. This is always something that everyone is concerned about, bread and butter issues. Like that I've always liked my PowerPoints trying to find out something. 9-month contracts, 3% raise. We're constantly trying to make sure that the Chancellor is aware that we need to keep having raises added each year. I think we got, was it 3 or 4% last year? And 3% this year. Overload for pay, that is in the VCCS handbook. Everyone is entitled to 10 hours. Now, not always will the budget allow that to happen. Some people mix overload and summer pay. Overload for pay, that's in the faculty handbook. You are entitled to 10 hours as long as your president and your dean can afford that in their budget. Summer pay is very, very different. There are 23 colleges and probably 23 formulas on summer pay. Summer pay is up to your individual president and his or her administration. There's 3 ways to doing summer pay. One is what we call equivalent pay. Equivalent pay means you get the same salary for teaching a course in the summer that you got for teaching that course in the fall or spring. That's the best way for teaching faculty. Worst way for a college that has a budget that's not so good. Another way is to pay faculty for overload. You know, that your pay is based on your overload salary, not on an equivalent salary. A third way is to pay your faculty based on adjunct pay, which is what your adjuncts would get. There is a huge difference, if you're paid at equivalent pay versus overload pay or adjunct pay, that's about twice as much money, depending on your academic rank. And so every year, your college presidents have the option of changing that formula. What CFAC did 3 years ago is we did a survey of all 23 community colleges and their summer pay. And it shed light on the issue. There were 10 colleges, I believe 10, that were giving maximum amount of summer pay, which was 10 hours and then 3 more for overload. And there were 2 colleges that were giving practically nothing. And we didn't do anything but survey and then publish our surveys. And I can't document this, but those 2 colleges that were giving practically nothing changed their policy the next year. Sometimes by shedding light on an issue, you can embarrass maybe people to come up to a standard that other colleges are maintaining. Salary compression is a complicated issue. It deals with how much senior faculty you're getting versus junior faculty at the same academic rank. And sometimes people that come in and have 15 years of experience can out-earn someone with 30 years of experience. And some of the colleges are dealing with that issue as well. Adjuncts, we talk about adjuncts. They play a vital role. We're very concerned about the percentage of adjunct teaching courses versus full-time. The credit limit now is pretty much what it's been the last couple of years, where an adjunct can teach as many as 12 hours in the fall, 12 hours in the spring, and 8 in the summer. The associate instructor position is a fairly new position. It came out of the re-engineering task force. And it's a 1-year full-time position with benefits. Many of our adjuncts apply for this position. They are required to teach a lot more than a teaching faculty member who is on a 3 or 5-year contract. But they don't have to do other things like serve on committees and go to graduation. Some colleges have used the associate instructor position very wisely, and it's helped them with their ratio between full-time and part-time faculty. Some colleges have not really experimented with it very much, but it's an interesting concept. And many of the associate instructors then eventually become full-time faculty when a position opens. Faculty evaluations. CFAC has done a lot about this. The policy, you probably all know the policy. There's a greater focus on new faculty. Everyone probably knows that when you come into the VCCS, you get 3 one-year contracts. And then at the end of your third one-year contract, you get a 3-year contract. And at the end of your 3-year contract, you're eligible for a 5-year contract, and that 5-year contract can be renewable right on up to retirement. There are a lot of new faculty coming into the VCCS. In fact, that's true nationwide for reasons that we all know. The baby boomers are getting a little long in the tooth. And speaking personally here, not insulting anybody in the audience, and they're retiring. And so what we want to make sure that those new faculty coming in are every bit as superb as the ones that are leaving. So the new faculty evaluation process was designed to put more emphasis on evaluating faculty in their first 3 one-year contracts, so that by the time you were eligible for a 3-year contract, you were pretty sure, and your dean was pretty sure, that this was someone that you wanted to live with the rest of their career. Because most people that get that multi-year contract stay. It's not tenure, but it's pretty close to tenure. And the 4 domains are how we evaluate those folks. The most important domain, of course, is teaching. All 4 are weighted every year in cooperation with your dean. And at the end of the year, there's a reward and recognition where faculty and their deans decide who's really done a good job, and there is a cash reward. Sometimes it can be significant, sometimes it's minimal, depends on the budget of that individual college that year. Let's see, just about winding down here, one thing that CFAC has done the last few years is we've tried to be more proactive. Instead of just being a group that gives the Chancellor advice and takes information from him and his cabinet back to our individual colleges, we wanted to try to change policy. And we've done that. Last year, we changed VCCS policy in 3 significant ways. The first was faculty evaluation language. The language had read that it was the faculty members' burden of proof to prove to their dean that they had met expectations. We hated that language. You know, why should any faculty member come in and say, well, you expect that I have not done a good job unless I prove to you that I have. We felt that the language should be that when a dean and a faculty member get together, the expectation is the faculty member has done his or her job unless there is substantive and documented proof otherwise. So we changed the language. Burden of proof, that language isn't in VCCS policy anymore. The default position is no longer does not meet expectations. CFAC led that fight. Something that is just brand new, but I think is really going to catch on, is CFAC last year put together with, and it passed ACOP, it passed the State Board, a new early retirement program. In the past, you were either full-time or you were retired, and there wasn't an awful lot in between, although a lot of full-timers came back as adjuncts. Now we have supplied a different off-ramp to retirement. And so maybe you're in your 60s or 70s and you're no longer really eager to teach 30 hours a year, but you're not ready to retire. You still have something to give. Now, in cooperation with your dean and your president, you can get a reduced contract in the last 3 years of employment. And that reduced contract can mean a 60% contract or an 80% contract with all of the benefits prorated. At Nova, a good friend of mine has taken advantage of that for next year, and so he is going to be on a 60% contract. And you're eligible for this each year, and you can have it for a total of 3 years, and then you're retired. Not too many people know about this yet, although it's VCCS policy, but I think you want to take this back to your senior faculty because a lot of them are going to find it a very attractive alternative. And then we passed a consensual familial relationship policy, and this was based on all of the news and colleges around the nation about students being vulnerable to sexual harassment, and I think we all knew that there were things that were being done, but there was nothing in the manual, in the VCCS policy, that said anything about it. So the consensual relationship policy is now VCCS policy, CFAC initiated. It says that a faculty member cannot have a romantic relationship with a student in her or his class. This is at the very base a conflict of interest. It's a power differential. It makes the student vulnerable, and guess what? If the relationship goes south, it makes the faculty member vulnerable too. And so that is now policy. Familial relationships deal with having someone in your class that might be your son or your daughter, aunt or uncle, and we kind of thought initially that maybe that should not be allowed. But then the smaller colleges weighed in, and they said, you know, at Mountain Empire or Paul D. Camp or Eastern Shore, you might be the only psychology professor at the college, and your son or daughter wants to take a class, and it's wrong for them to deny that. And so under the familial relationship, you just need to tell your dean that there is someone in my class who I'm related to, and that's it. And so you've covered your responsibility. Now there's a gap in this policy that we haven't figured out. Let's say your spouse is in your class, then you would have to tell your dean that there's a potential conflict of interest because you have a relative in the class, and so you've handled the familial part. But the consensual part would then mean that you could not have a romantic relationship with it. So you know, that was the hole in the policy. We haven't figured that one out. And actually, we didn't even tell the Chancellor about that little hole in the policy. And so I would kind of keep that one quiet. So these were three CFAC initiatives. I think I'm just about at the, reward, recognition. These are things that are all in the VCCS handbook, and you should encourage your faculty to apply for things like the Chancellor's Teaching Excellence Award, which will be announced, I guess, a little bit later tonight. And so for us, it's all about the students. I love Far Side, and it took me a while to understand what that cartoon was. And so try to figure it out if you can. My wife explained it to me, and she's far brighter than I am, so she got it immediately. Took me 5 minutes to get it. Notice everybody looking at their watch in this ESL class. Okay, so now, that was a quick and dirty. I think I did it in 15 minutes. No?
No.
No.
How long?
30.
Oh, gosh. All right, so now what we're going to do is these characters really keep me in line. We'll throw it open to questions, and any of our panel will be happy to answer questions. And the questions, I think, should focus maybe a little bit on what you want us to do that we haven't done. Not just what we've told you we've tried to do, but we are your representatives. So is there something out there that you would like to get the Chancellor's ear, maybe see a policy change? Just throw it open. And Carol is going to float around the room with a mic, I think. Okay.
I have a concern as a nursing instructor, and I had spoke to Brian at our college about it earlier, and it's probably maybe something we can do nothing about, but it's something that concerns me. we just went through ASIN recertification with the Board of Nursing for our accreditation. And when we were meeting with the members of that board, they brought to our attention that they were from multiple states, and all of those states gave their faculty full credit, hour for each hour they were in clinical or lab. And in our facility, if a faculty goes to clinical for a 12-hour day with students, then we only get half those hours. And my concern or my desire would be is to see some motivation or movement in our college so that faculty that are in facilities with students for 12 hours are getting full credit for those hours.
So we talked about that at our last meeting. Who wants to field that? Sharon, Tony?
No, I was just going to say that that's on the table where it's under discussion. Well, in biology, the labs, the science labs are part of that discussion. The nursing labs, clinicals came up as well. I think Ellen might could probably address that too because it's concerned.
I know that there is no consistency throughout the VCCS. There are different ratios in different areas of health professions and nursing. Some are 5-to-1, some are 2-to-1. I'm not aware of any that are 1-to-1. That doesn't mean there aren't any, but it is something that we are discussing.
There is a work group of ASAC, the vice presidents, who are looking at this and trying to gauge how different colleges are handling it. I don't know that the overall purpose of this subcommittee is to come up with, the answer to be implemented across the system. But they are looking at that, and they did ask for CFAC reps who teach in the sciences to serve on that committee. So we have 2 members. Carol's one of them, but they haven't met yet, correct? So this will be developing over the next year, but it is a big concern.
Volunteer or any nursing faculty, I'm sure any nursing faculty.
I think the
Biology.
issue is it clearly is stated in policy that for science labs, it's a half ratio. For a 3-hour lab, I'm paid an hour and a half. That's clearly stated in policy. And I think the issue with the work group is there's many different interpretations and applications, although there's very specific policy language. So I think that the first step is information gathering to see just what the extent is out there. And then based on that information, I think only then will we be able to decide how to proceed. But right now, we don't really fully understand how people are applying this and determining this. We
And
know
that's-
that there's differences, but
And
what
that's
are
the
they?
survey.
Yeah,
We're doing
so this
another
is
one
the
of those
survey.
surveys that's
Mhm.
going to, our deans are very involved in that as well, so something.
We have faculty, we're in hospital 24 hours, 2 12-hour days. And then we come back and we teach 2 classrooms, 3 classrooms of classes, and, in addition to that. And we get, it's fast.
And I do know they are aware, they do.
So we have another question from back here.
I just had a clarification question on the retirement policy. Obviously, it's not for me, but it came up. Maybe for you. It came up at our faculty senate meeting last month because our CFAC, Marty, is on as our CFAC, and he was talking about it. But it was our understanding that, you just stated it's VCCS policy, but we were told at our faculty senate meeting that the college has to decide to offer it.
That is true.
That's
So
true.
that's really not, we can't go to our senior faculty and say it's an option because our college has decided not to offer it.
Right.
That part's true. It's in VCCS policy, but each president can decide to implement it or not. The only argument that I've heard against it has been at smaller colleges where you might have only one faculty member in a discipline that is a high-demand discipline, but one that there just aren't a lot of adjuncts. And so some deans have spoken out and saying, well, I really can't give up 2 classes and let this faculty member teach 60%. I need them for 100%. And that's the only argument that I've heard against the policy.
But I think it's just important that people understand that.
I think it's not dissimilar.
college, you know, we're not a small college, and so I just think it's important that we do communicate that it is up to the different colleges. So it's a great program, but it's not necessarily open to everybody in the
I think
VCCS.
if I could add a clarification, it's not that different from the associate instructor, where this is also an option that exists in VCCS policy, and then individual college presidents are going to decide if it's appropriate or not to apply. So, but I think it is important that folks understand it does exist in policy, but it's going to be a college-by-college basis in terms of how it.
And it really was an easy sell for the presidents because there's very few things that are a win-win situation. This was a win for senior faculty because it gave them an option. And most presidents love the policy because it saved them money. Because if a faculty member goes from 15 hours to 9 hours in the fall and spring, they're going to backfill with adjuncts. And so I think if you're at a college where the deans and presidents have been reluctant, maybe they just need to know a little bit more about the policy because it's not hurting colleges at all. In fact, it's helping their budget. But it's new, and so maybe you just need to sell it. At Thomas Nelson, is that where you are? At Thomas Nelson. And I think John Dever, he used to be at Novi, I think you could convince him. I don't know.
Hi, Charlie. So I'm from Thomas Nelson, too. I didn't mean to monopolize it. But speaking about the associate instructor position, I came in under that 4 years ago. I just have a real concern, though, and I'm not sure if most people know. I came in as the one-year associate instructor where you have the increased teaching load but none of the other responsibilities. And you come in at a certain pay grade because it's different, right? You're kind of a full-time adjunct. And I don't know if a lot of people realize that then there's a 15% maximum. That's how our school has chosen to interpret this. That then, even though I consider it a different position, coming in as an assistant professor is very different than being the associate instructor. But I was only allowed a 15% bump being hired in the VCCS and taking a new position, right? So I quickly skyrocketed to the second bottom of my division, and now for the rest of my life, that's where I started, and I can only get increases from the governor or from promotion. And so that's how we've chosen to interpret that, and I think it's really disingenuous that you bring people in as an associate instructor. That is a different position than my position as an assistant professor, and I'm upset about it. And it's how Thomas Nelson has chosen to interpret that, and the problem is once you have you sign on the dotted line, you come in at a certain pay grade, there's nothing. My dean can't fix it. It's gone to my president. He can't fix. Nobody can fix this. I will be where I am forever and ever, even though, you know, until I get raises. And it happens to a lot of us. And it's, you know, we've chosen to use that associate instructor position a lot at Thomas Nelson, but I think it's something that should be known. And I don't think we should interpret it. I think it's a conversation worth having with HR and the Chancellor that we should not be doing this.
You know, that issue hasn't come up, and I think that's really a powerful issue, so thank you. I've never understood that pay scale applied. And you're right, I'm not sure that's consistent at the other colleges, but there should be a consistent policy on that, so thank you. And let's make a note.
And feel free, I'm happy to be a case study. You can take up the cause. Stacy Schneider, Thomas Nelson. I'd love a remedy to the situation. So.
Do you know her name? Would you afterwards come on up and we'll get your name and everything?
100%.
Business card ready.
Can I ask for some clarification on the early retirement? So let's say the faculty member decides to take that 60% load. Is that's reflected in their salary?
Yes. It can be 80% too. It is reflected in their salary. Whatever their salary was for that year when they decide to go on to phased retirement. If you decide you want to be a 60% for the following year, then you take your contract and you multiply by 60%, and that's what you're going to be paid.
But isn't your retirement based on the last 3 years?
No, your highest 3 years.
Highest.
So it doesn't hurt you.
Good clarification.
Charlie, one concern I have about the pay raises over the last decade they've often been offset by either increases in health insurance or mandatory contributions to retirement. Have you guys studied the pay increases to see if they've even been remotely kept pace with inflation?
The easy answer is we kind of depend on Chris Lee to help us out there, and we haven't. I know that one year, you might remember, we didn't get a pay increase, but they helped us out with our health insurance as a kind of a bone that they threw to us. So as far as I know, the last 2 years, the pay increases, as small as they've been, have not been compromised by additional payment for health insurance. That the formulas remain the same. But that's a good question.
Well, Dr. Lee, who's the Vice Chancellor for HR, when I was on CFAC, I'm trying to think how long ago, it was maybe 5 years ago, that the VCCS did a system-wide look at salary scales and tried to do some internal alignments. And that information was shared with presidents, and then some presidents chose to act on it and others did not. That was, I want to say, maybe 5 years ago, 4 to 5 years ago. I don't know how often the system office does that, but we haven't heard about that since that happened, however many years ago that was.
That's a good question, and I think we need to study that to make sure that we're not losing our 3% because they're taking away from other benefits.
The 5% we received a few years ago was almost completely
Correct.
Right.
So that's when it first came to my attention. Over the years, I think they've been very minimal raises, if at all, because of the cost.
Right. Right. That's a good question.
I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about the faculty awards and recognition tied to the evaluations. I wonder sometimes, and I understand that the different colleges can do it different ways, but it does seem as if the setup could lend itself to some people getting multiple awards, other people maybe never being recognized simply because they're not popular, they're quiet, they're whatever. Especially when it's based on nominations and things like that rather than true merit. And I don't know if you have any input on that or any way to make it more consistent across the system so that all faculty that are doing a good job get some level of extra recognition from a monetary standpoint.
We did look at rewards and recognition a little bit at our last meeting, just how the 23 colleges were implementing it. What we noticed is there was a dramatic difference between how much the reward was, because some colleges just didn't have any money. They had to give some money to it, but it could be minimal. Some colleges gave more. And it does differ, but the reward and recognition system is in the new faculty evaluation policy. It's up to the individual college as to how to implement it, but most have implemented it by having committees that consisted of the teaching faculty themselves, making decisions about other teaching faculty. And I think that's good. Now, you're right. Sometimes the same people get the same rewards over and over, but that would be up to the teaching faculty at each of the 23 colleges. And if you're on that committee, I think you would want to try to make sure that those people that are always doing a good job but just aren't very vocal and don't brag about themselves are the ones that should be getting these rewards too.
But they can
CFAC
nominate
is looking
yourself.
at this, though.
Yeah, we are, and you can nominate yourself as well. It's not just other people nominating.
Well, and in some colleges, students can nominate
And
you
students, too,
And
as
some
well.
colleges are really promoting that with their students, nominate your faculty members, and other colleges are not or do not have that student nomination mechanism. So it really varies widely from college to college. But we are looking at how colleges are handling that and trying to share some of those different models that we may want to incorporate in our own systems to make them more effective.
And as a committee, you really need to market the programs, the committees that are working on this at the individual colleges. So you do bring out what those are worth, what your particular rewards are, and to get the people that can nominate in the fold, particularly the deans, because they're the ones that know what each individual faculty member is doing when they're up for evaluation. So they're the ones that could also be the ones that nominate, know what those people are doing, that are more quiet.
I understand what you're saying. I guess my input is that since it's tied to evaluations, it's, to me, the
This is
board
not-
is different
Was yours
than
tied?
a merit-based acknowledgement of your work. And the fact that it's tied to evaluations to some
I
extent,
don't think everybody's in.
the inconsistency bothers me. I don't know what else to say. I would hate to have my salary based on, a committee that decides, that type of a thing. And it is, somebody can get an extra good chunk of money because they did really well, but somebody else might have done just as well, and nobody thought to recognize them. Or maybe the students didn't because teaching's really tough or something. And it just seems a bit arbitrary to me, and that bothers me.
I do think there should be a tracking device in place to monitor who's getting nominated.
Some people are, but, is that fair on the opposite end? If that's an exceptional teacher, again, I did a really exceptional. So it's hard, it's a hard thing, because you got it looking at it both ways.
Can we give this one a question?
Okay, yeah.
When I was on CFAC years ago, I tried to remind CFAC members of this. We can complain about what VCCS can and cannot do, but really